Hello, and welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. I'm old. Well, anyways, I just wanted to say that because I just wanted everyone to know that I've been fairly active in photography since about 2009 or so, since I first got my first DSLR, the Canon Rebel XS, or 1000D, or the Kiss F, depending on where you're from. And by 2010, I had bit the bullet and bought my first ever full-frame digital SLR, the 5D Mark II. Yeah, that camera was awesome. It was my primary camera for a really long time, basically until 2019. From the time that I got it to around that year, I had used it for literally everything. It came with me basically everywhere that I went. On paid gigs to vacation, work trips. The camera was literally around the world, from Florida to Tokyo, and a few spots in between. But, yeah, by 2019, I thought that it's time for me to get with the times. It's time to go for a mirrorless camera. And I saw the release of EOS R, and I thought, wow, that's too much for me. So, when the RP came out, I went ahead and picked one up in September of 2019. And shortly after that, I regrettably sold my 5D Mark II. Well, anyways, so really, all of that intro was to give you context to the meaty point of this video, and that is, I'm going to talk about my experiences with the EOS RP, the ups and downs, the side to sides. We're going to go all over the place with the camera. And the history about me was just a bit of the context as to how I came to get the RP. So yeah, hopefully that was interesting. But let's get into it. Camera details and specs. The EOS RP. This is the second full-frame camera, well, second ever camera in the RF mount, and it was released in the 14th of March, 2019. Features a full-frame sensor at 26.2 megapixels, and it was a CMOS sensor, of course, all of them are nowadays, and it was a sensor that was originally seen in the 6D Mark II. It had a couple minor tweaks. The camera has Canon's dual pixel AF system. I'm going to call that the DPAF. Hopefully that catches on. It covers 88% of the frame horizontally or 100% vertically. It can shoot from ISO 100 to 40,000. And if you expand it, it'll actually top out at 102,400 ISO and go down to ISO 50. The shutter is good for bulb mode, 30 seconds, and 1/4000th of a second, and it tops out at 5 FPS. Let's give that a go. There you go. And the buffer depth is actually impressively deep. If you're doing just RAWs or JPEGs, but not both, it'll go till the card is full. If you're doing RAWs and JPEGs, it'll go for 98 if you're not using the compressed RAW. It'll do more if you are, but I don't know. I think that's like 130. The RP has an EVF, obviously, with a resolution of 2.36 milli K dots. It's alright. It has, however, a 3-inch flippy, outy, tilty, flippy, touchy screen. Ooh. The rear screen is actually good for 1.4 milli or 1.04 milli K dots. And the camera can shoot 4K video, but only in 1.7 crop mode, and it gets worse if you need to use the electronic stabilization. We'll get into that later. For memory, it uses a single UHS 2 SD card slot, and the battery is rated for 250 shots via SEPA rating. And it charges using either the provided charging brick, or if you have a USB-C PD charger, you can use that. Additionally, it also has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you can transfer and remote operate the camera with ease. Now, the camera weighs in at a 485 grams without a lens, but with the battery and SD card, meaning it weighs just less than half a plena. Lastly, when the camera was introduced, it had an introductory price of $1,299 USD, or about 1,750 Canadian dollar dues. Nowadays, at the time of writing, that is March 2024, right off of the Canon website, it is about $50,000 due to inflation. Just kidding. If you go on the Canon USA website, it's like $999.99. And if you look at the Canon Canada website, it's on for $1,249.99 in Canadian, obviously. The good. We'll start with ergonomics. This camera feels great in the hand, and this is considering that it is very small and pretty light. And with that smallness, usually you expect an uncomfortable camera. But as you can see, all of my fingers rest well on the camera grip. It's fairly deep, and again, good holding, especially for one-handed operation. The buttons are well placed, and despite the Canon not having the control nubbin that you normally used to having on a full-frame camera, it's actually not too bad to live without it. And this is partly due to Canon's implementation of the touchscreen functions. It's actually a pretty reasonable, it's actually a good touchscreen implementation. The UI and how it operates is fairly top-notch. Basically, if you have a box around your icon, you can touch it and manipulate it. And it does slidesies and tapsies and multi-touchies. And you got your punch-ins. What I'm saying is the touchscreen operation is pretty good. Look, I can even manipulate things looking at my phone, looking at the camera. Wow. Oh, let's see. Okay, let's see if I can get the sliding bits. I guess not. Oh, I was not doing sliding bits. Alright. Here. Look at that. So overall, the UI and the menu and system is very good. All straightforward, and if you're familiar with Canon at all, you're going to be familiar with this camera. Now, additionally, the two control dials on this camera, one over here and one in the rear, they are just excellent. My index finger naturally falls towards the control dial by the shutter, and my thumb basically sits on the rear control dial of the back. This is excellent. So this camera is very nice to one-hand use, and the only real gripe I have about it is the power switch, which is up here. For some reason they decided an entire ass circular nubbin is a good choice to fit with just a power switch. I really think they could have done something else with that left control wheel thing, and maybe put the power switch somewhere else or underneath it. I don't know. It kind of just feels like there's really not too much going on the left side. On the plus side, what this basically means is that you have almost everything you could ever want at your disposal on the right side, with the exception of the menu button. So yeah, there's that. Now, all this to say, this camera feels like it was built with a lot of care going into how it's going to feel overall, and everything has a snappiness to the operation. And, fun fact, it has some degree of weather sealing. Although it's not laden with gaskets like you'd normally expect, apparently it's done through tight paneling. Either way, Canon says it's the same as the 6D Mark II, so it should be able to take some rain. Now, when it comes to stills, the RP is solid. It has an AA filter, but Canon always done a pretty good job of doing the balance between capturing detail and fighting moire. In good light, since the sensor will do you right. The AF performance is also pretty quick. The PDAF, or DPAF, PDAF, it's good stuff. It doesn't have the super modern bells and whistles like wiener dog detection or unibrow focus, but it's generally really quick and it's pretty accurate. The camera even does a reasonably good job of tracking moving subjects. I've used it while literally running in like a relay race, and it generally was able to take snaps of people running in a straight line. Probably good for like sports too, but just keep in mind you only got 5 FPS. And another nice thing about the RF, although it's more of a RF system as a whole, is the lenses. Now, when I first got the camera, there actually wasn't much to the RF system. I think maybe 4 or so lenses, and other than the 35mm 1.8 IS STM macro that you see here, all the other lenses were really, really pricey. Now that we're in the future, the RF full frame library is surprisingly decent. There's 36 full frame options. With the crop ones, less nice, just 4. But we're reviewing the RP, so for the full frame perspective, we're looking good. And good thing, they're not all super duper expensive L lenses that cost like $4,000. Some of them are less than that. For example, like I said, the 35mm 1.8 I have, it's pretty great. Costs like 600 Canadian dollar dues or 400 USD, something like that. And I have the 50mm 1.8 STM, which was like $200 Canadian or 150 USD. So honestly, not bad. This is also a Canon product, so you can get an EF to RF adapter, and it'll work great. I bought the one with control ring, so I have access to the entire EF library, right? And the only ones that I can think of that I want to put on that makes perfect sense to work on the RP is my 200mm 1.8, which let's quickly jam that on there. So, the Canon, it does fit right. Frame fits. Now, I'm gonna be one-handing this, so it's gonna kind of suck, but. Whew. Look at that. Good balance. I don't know that I want to one-hand this from the side of the camera body, but look at that. EOS RP with 200mm 1.8 with the 2x teleconverter fits, and I can't see anything. All right. It's also on manual focus. Why would I do that? Oh, that's useless. All right, let's put that down. It's very heavy. Oh boy. Oh, the camera's freaking out. All right, turn it off. But anyways, as you might have guessed, or not, the adapter adds a bit of chunkiness. Oh, I had to do this. Flip it this way. All right, you can see the adapter adds this. So it does kind of make the camera chunkier. I mean, maybe I could have picked a smaller lens to demo that, but whatever. Ugh. All right, putting that down. Ugh. So yeah. The other thing though is that this camera, it's pretty good to use with older manual focus glass. I'm bringing this up because I think the RP actually does exceptionally good at using vintage glass. What with the full frame goodness and its overall fairly low cost for a full frame camera. Now I'm aware you can do this with any other mirrorless camera, but like I said, the RP is exceptionally cheap for a brand new full frame, and it has the your basic manual assist tools. You got your punch-in zooms, you got your peaking modes, Personally, this is probably my favorite part about shooting the RP. I basically have every adapter under the sun produced for RF or EF, since I could just mount the EF adapter on and then toss whatever adapter on top of that. So yeah, pretty great stuff. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is Canon's Wi-Fi and Bluetooth support. Honestly, when I was shooting with the camera, I didn't really appreciate just how good it was until I switched to Sony. The Canon one does a lot right. The app is pretty easy to use. It connects like every single time, and you can manipulate a lot of stuff on the Canon app. You can even transfer over JPEGs. Now, you can do this on the Sony app too, but honestly, the user experience is a lot worse. The app basically, it's kind of poo on the Sony. The controls, they're just more limiting, at least on my A7 III, and like, I don't know, there's something about the Sony remote app via the Wi-Fi, it's not great. I'm using it right now, and it is acceptable. What I can see, like, looking down this way where my phone is, the video that is streaming to my phone is choppy. When I hit the record button from the phone, it takes like 3 seconds before the record timer pops up, and by the time it says I've been rolling for 5 seconds, it's not great. The Canon app did not do that. The Canon app was surprisingly good. I mean, let me get this perfectly clear though. The app isn't even perfect or that good, but I realized the bar for camera control apps is just very low. The Sony one, I think, is one of the ones pulling that bar down. And there are some things wrong with it, like the transfers for the Wi-Fi transfer seem a bit slow given how fast the connection is, and given the fact that usually my phone is like 3 feet from the camera when it's transferring using the Canon. But it does transfer, and like I said, the connection is usually pretty stable, more than what I can say for the Sony. Additionally, for some reason, in 2019, the app doesn't have an intervalometer in it. I don't know why, but when I was shooting with the RP a lot, it was one of my it was actually extraordinarily useful in shooting long exposure and cold weather, because I could get the camera set up and run back to a warm car and then just grab my phone, adjust the exposure, adjust the compensation, adjust shutter speed, all the things, and then just let the camera go, and then when I was done, pack it in, and then go home. So it's good stuff. Lastly, I want to talk about the video. Not the 4K though, we're going to talk about that later. The 1080p. It's pretty good. I'm not a videographer, so don't take it hugely with a grain of salt. I'll probably insert a clip somewhere shortly to show you the 1080p footage. And I personally thought it was reasonably nice. Plus you get your mic input on the camera. See if I can show you it. Oh, okay. I'm just using the lens to hold it now, but mic input there. Oh, nope. That is the HDMI. Mic input is here. Yes. So you do get a mic input, and the flippy, tilty, touchy screen is very useful for vlogging on the camera. And in the 1080p mode, your DPAF works in this mode, so focus is easy and quick. Now, it's not as good as a lot of its competitors, again, of this era. You're looking at your A7 3s and 2s and your Nikon Z5s, I think. But it is cheaper than all of those. And I've actually used the RP to shoot everything on another channel that I have, which covers wristwatches. Chris's Ticks, if anyone is interested, I'll link below. But that entire channel is shot on the RP, so if you want to check that out, go for it. The bad. Unfortunately, this section is going to probably get a bit ranty, and a bit long. So this camera, the RP, unfortunately, smells of serious gatekeeping. The camera just seems designed very, very intentionally not to overstep any of their other high-end products. And I get it, but sometimes this is a tough pill to swallow. Even though it's the cheapest full frame camera, it ain't like free, and it still costs some money. So there's some things about the camera that just don't sit that well with me. Now, the one thing that initially caught flack was at launch, it couldn't do 1080p at 23.98p. Now, that had been corrected shortly after via firmware updates, but I think without the backlash of the community there, this might not have happened. But yeah, so in October of 2019, they unlocked the 1080 23.98p mode. So that's some good news, but there's more. Unfortunately, there's some really weird things about the camera. Like, it has an electronic shutter, right? Like, but you only really get access to the silent shooting option in one automatic mode, the silent shooting mode. And it's an automatic mode, so there's no option to like control stuff other than like exposure comp. And you can't really turn it on in other modes, with the exception of one bracketing mode where it's on by default. And so you can kind of like trick the camera into using the E shutter for that. But it's really odd that you just can't switch it on or off. Like, this is in a lot of other cameras. Like, it's in my XT1, just from like 2012. Now, I'm aware the camera has a slow sensor readout, but like, why? Why Canon? Why not have this just in the menu as a regular option to toggle on or off? Yes, I'm aware in the e-shutter mode your RAWs go down to 12-bit, but whatever. But yeah, in other words, so it's not available in normal shooting modes, and you got to use the weird automatic mode or the weird bracketing thing, and it is annoying. Now, the thing that I think most people are aware of for the RP is the 4K video. It's very meh, and that is true. And that is a lot because of the 1.7 times crop. It is basically a little worse than APS-C crop, and the output isn't super nice. Now, if you also need to use electronic image stabilization, the crop worsens. So you can forget wide-angle videos. Now, additionally, with the 4K, the camera, for some reason, decides that it cannot use the DPF, which really sucks, because the DPF is very nice. It's very fast, it's very accurate. It's like one of Canon's nice selling points. But yeah, so you don't get that, and you go back to contrast detect, and it's bad. It's very slow. It's very annoying. So it's not super fun. Lastly, though, the other thing with the 4K is that the camera is just sampling from the center, and it's not doing any fancy binning or other things to improve your video output, so 4K can get noisy, and it's generally not as sharp as it could be. Overall, the 4K mode just isn't that fun. We'll have a look in a second where I'm going to shoot it directly beside my A7 III, and you can see the differences in the 4K output. Another point to talk about is the sensor. Well, it does have a couple pluses. Like I said, it is a 26.2 megapixel camera, and at the time, that was a teeny bit more than your average of 24 for full frame cameras. But there are some minuses. Like I said, this sensor in here, I'll show you it. That guy, right there. That is from the 6D Mark II. So, when it's put in the RP in 2019, it was already 2 years old. And when it was new, 2 years old prior to that, it already had some some known things about it. Now, again, in terms of resolution, it's all fine and dandy, but high ISO and dynamic range are not super good, especially the dynamic range. I actually couldn't tell that the camera sensor DR had improved from when I had my 5D Mark II, a camera from 2008. And when you consider the ISO, it's better, but not super great. I would have been super fooled if you had told me that the RP's performance was from 2012, not 2019. So yeah, it was a bit weird to go from a camera in 2008 to 2019, and then it was better, but wasn't the jump I was expecting to see in 10 years time. And again, I'm going to compare it to the A7 III, which I'm now currently shooting the video on. When I first got that, like this past September, I was legitimately blown away at the high ISO performance and the dynamic range. Like it actually surprised me how good it was. Now, that is kind of not great for the RP, because it basically shows, at least it tells me that Canon for this camera did not want to put their nicer sensor from the R in there, even though that was, also at the time not the greatest for dynamic range or even high ISO, but this 60 sensor has some misgivings. Now, that being said, in good light, when you're shooting within its dynamic range and you got reasonable shutter speeds, the sensor will produce amazingly excellent photos. And I know you should always just shoot when the light is right or make your own light, but sometimes that is just not possible. Like when I had the RP, I'd take it with me on like work trips, and sometimes I'd be out in like Lisbon or whatever, and I only got like 1 or 2 evenings. I don't know what your work trips are like. I don't really get I don't get to stay there for 2 weeks and enjoy the scenery. We got stuff to do, so you only get a couple evenings. And I like taking photographs, but I'm not gonna be dedicating my entire visit to doing one photo. I'm gonna take pictures as I visit and see things, and enjoy places that I may not ever come back to. So yeah, but the sensor is generally though fine. It's just at the time that it was made, it was not really up to par with other cameras of its type. Now again, the price of the camera has to come into play. It is still like the cheapest and smallest, or one of the smallest full frame sensor mirrorless cameras, Sigma FP notwithstanding. You can only make up so much by saying that it's cheap. Now, luckily, with the newer Canon R8, you got much better improvements in its sensor, but it's also more dollars. Another thing the camera doesn't have, which we're all kind of used to now, zero IBIS. Now, not a problem if you have a lens with optical stabilization, but kind of sucks. Now, I know at the time though, for Canon, this is kind of just par for the course, but other weird negatives are the battery life. Like I said earlier, the SEPA rating is like 250 shots, and SEPA isn't the end all be all, but really the camera's numbers are not good. I always kept the second battery pack with me, and like sometimes I do shoot a lot, and if you're doing like an event or like even a reasonably long hike, a single pack probably won't do you. So if you do get one of these, be prepared to either get a second pack or pack a PD capable USB-C charger. Luckily, most of the times chargers are pretty PD ready, so you can just plug it in and you're good to go in between shooting sessions, which is now what I did prior to switching to the A7. Alright, and we're going to go back to lenses. Now, I said it was good and positive earlier on, but there's one thing noting the RF system. There are basically no third-party AF lenses. There's like a couple that snuck through, but they're now expensive and rare, so effectively there are none. If you ever get Samyang or Viltrox Envy from friends that are shooting Nikon or Sony, keep having that. As of March 2024, there are yet to be any widely available AF lenses in a third party, although apparently Canon are working hard to try to rectify that. But yeah, as of right now, no dice. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, minor annoyance, but still an annoyance, battery indicator. It is 2019, and Canon still insists, oh, it's not 2019 now, but yeah, when it was new, it was 2019. And Canon insists that you get a 3-segment indicator. You should be able to see it. Like, that's why. Why is that not a percentage or, something a little more granular? Like three segment indicator for a battery in 2019. Good job, Canon. Conclusion time. Do I recommend the EOS RP? Generally speaking, no. At this point, the R8 exists, and it is $14.99, $200 more than the RP's initial price in US dollars. It offers much more oomph for the dollar. However, if you want a camera purely for stills, and you can overlook the low dynamic range, and it's kind of crippled 4K video mode, it is worth considering, because it is a really cheap way to get into full frame photography. And this is especially true if you're not considering used options. I would have to say though that it's a more appetizing deal when you get your bigger discounts. Like if you hop on and you see the Canon refurb store, this thing apparently comes on at 600 USD, around 820 Canadian dollars. At that price, the RP is actually amazing, right? Full frame camera, 600 USD. No, you're not getting the fanciest bells and whistles or the most dynamic range, but for $600, that is a little cheaper than the 35mm lens, right? If you can get a used copy for $600, that is a much more palatable deal. Otherwise, I would consider, if you're looking for a mirrorless full frame camera, used options. Now, if you want to do any 4K at all, just steer clear. It's a hassle, and honestly, again, at this point, there are cameras that do 4K that are better and cheaper. They might not be full frame, right? But you'll get a much better output. Now, if you want to do occasional 1080p shooting, or if you just want to stick to 1080p, it's actually perfectly fine. You'll have a nice stills camera and a 1080p shooter. So if you're up for that, the RP is not a bad buy. Again, especially if you can find it at the lower refurbished price of 600 USD. Now, I'll be honest though, if you want to use the camera to shoot vintage glass, I think that's probably where the RP is the best application, because like I said, You get the full frame sensor goodness, you get a low cost, and if you're shooting vintage glass just for the photo stills aspect, this camera, these things actually rock, since the adapters are basically dirt cheap and can adapt to almost any piece of vintage glass and shoot with it. And you'll get your reasonable focus assist options. Your punch and zooms are going to have mine mapped to this custom button here, so my finger's very quick to get to it, and then I can easily focus my manual lenses. So I think for that kind of specific purpose, as weird as it sounds, like the RP makes a great camera for that. Better than vintage DSLRs, better than used old DSLRs that still have a mirror. Because just composing through live view with the vintage glass and focusing through it is pretty great, unless of course you're going to use DSLR and so use one of those split mirror finders or any of the other ones that have the manual focus aids. Alright, I'm going to be fully honest though. If you want a full frame camera, you want to shoot good full 4K footage, you want your modern dynamic range, I think if you can stomach it, it's time to leave the Canon ecosystem. If you're considering the RP, you got better options for, at this point, pretty similar price in the Sony and Nikon ecosystem. Since I switched to Sony land, it's been pretty good. The upfront costs of the Sony body costing a little more is easily offset by the slew of high-quality third-party lenses that are usually significantly cheaper than first-party ones. And, like, at the moment, the first-party nice Canon glass is extremely expensive. Like, the RF 50mm 1.2L, that's a lot of dollars. And really, for Canon, at this point in time, with autofocus, you don't really got anything other than first-party offerings. So it's Canon or nothing. And that kind of sucks. Again, unless you're going to use the EF adapter and adapt your older EF lenses if you have them. But if you don't, then you're just starting with the RF system. It can get expensive, and saving money on the body, like, it may end up just costing you anyways, just because you're going to be using the Canon glass. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the EOS RP. Let me know what you think of the camera, and do you have one? Are you considering buying one of these? Let me know. And until next time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.